Module 2, Section 3, Types of Interview Questions. I break interview questions down into 5 different categories: the basic, common, the behavioral competency, the analytical, technical, and situational. And when you interview, you will encounter more than likely more than one type of question. The basic common questions, they're looking at your work history, double check your qualifications. They want to fill in any gaps in your work history, know basic details about maybe why you're wanting this job. And sometimes they use this first question to put a candidate at ease because it's easy to talk about yourself. And it sees if the candidate is confident in speaking about themselves. It also does a check on, is the candidate reasonable and in check with reality? I have a section with 12 or so different common questions with examples on how to answer them. Look at those and prepare answers for those because you will encounter one of those questions. I can almost guarantee it. The behavioral or competency type questions, this is when we get into answering with the STAR method with the situation, task, action, and result. And you will be able to pick these out real quick. Like they will usually start with, tell us about a time or give us an example. It's where they're going to want an example of some past behavior or some past challenge or some past work output that you've completed. And they usually break these down into different competencies like team or selection criteria, like teamwork, communication, leadership, safety, conflict resolution. The idea is with behavioral type question is the past predicts the future. And there's a lot of research on this. So this is basically a demonstration of your experience in words. Now, take time in that STAR interview section or that STAR method section of this training and really get your examples down prior to go into an interview, because a lot of your examples could cover more than one competency. The analytical type of questions. This is to sit you in a place to think through something before you answer. They're saying if you've got all the relevant data, if you're going to ask a question and ask for clarification before answering. Might be something like, you have a deadline that you're behind on, and a colleague comes to you and needs assistance. How do you handle this? So it's kind of situational, but it's also analytical. They're stopping to see and if you're going to ask, well, what type of assistance does the colleague need? Maybe questions to see if the candidate is a critical thinker and look at both sides before providing an answer. Now, another form of question, as I mentioned, is the technical. And they want you to demonstrate your experience. You may be asked to complete a task. This is common in computer programming. The task given may not be actually what they are evaluating. As I mentioned in the past, I've used this to evaluate if someone was following or thinking through from a safety standpoint. May see if the candidate is a problem solver, may be geared to see how the candidate deals with challenges. Then you have the situational type of questions. And the candidate is described a situation and asked how they would handle it. You must analyze and think through the steps, design to see your level of understanding in dealing with common situations, maybe a brain teaser to evaluate your ability to deal with the challenge. Now, how do we prepare for these questions? We mentioned a little bit of it on last slide, but let's get into a little more detail. So these common basic questions There's a list of some of them in this training, as I mentioned, and you're going to encounter one of those questions. I can almost guarantee. Go ahead and write out what your answers would be to those questions and be prepared to answer them. Know your resume and work history and be able to efficiently communicate the information. Be confident in speaking about yourself. You'd be surprised how many people are, I understand they're humble, and it's hard to brag on yourself sometimes or your accomplishments. But in a job interview, you need to be able to step up and deliver what you've achieved and be proud of it. So the behavioral competency type of questions, as I mentioned, have 3 to 5 work examples you can leverage that can demonstrate an array of competencies. You're going to want to use the STAR method to answer these type of questions. You want to be able to explain the situation, task, action, and result. And we have a lesson here on the STAR method. So, like when I say an array of competencies, you could have one example that could touch on safety and interpersonal communication, where you had to do all of these things in that process, or consider all these competencies. Analytical type questions, look for questions that have multiple answers that need more information. Like I said, don't be worried about asking for more clarification or what type of something that they're looking for. The technical questions, always be ready to demonstrate your skill if you're a skilled worker. If the workspace does not have the necessary equipment, ask for it. Don't be shy. Think through the task step by step prior to starting. Consider safety prior to starting. So before you start into the tasks, think through the process you're going to use to complete it. The situational questions, take a moment. Don't start answering immediately. Completely hear the question and ask for clarification if needed. Think in a process, step-by-step format, and deliver your answer that way. Think through all variables that could impact the situation. It is okay not to speak for a bit and for there to be silence while you put this together. Let's talk about one more type of interview question. This is that at the end of the interviewer turns around, looks at you and goes, "Do you have any questions for us?" You want to have 2 or 3 max interview questions to ask the interviewer. So what does that look like? Here's some examples. As the managers, what do you see the greatest challenge is for your organization? After they give you an answer, it's okay to ask more clarification or more questions to clarify the who, what, when, where, how. What has been your company's worst day? What does success look like in this position? Where's this company headed in the next 5 years? What do you like most about this company? How would you describe the style of leadership in this company? Has this company been downsized recently? Just about every interview, you're going to be asked to tell a little bit about yourself. One of the most memorable interviews I had was a candidate who briefly explained their answer to this question and then turned around and looked at me and asked if they could ask a question. I said, yes. The candidate said, "I've done my research on the company and noticed a steady increase in the stock price. Would you say that is attributed to the cost of the commodity or due to changes in your business?" The candidate spun the table on me. Our team all remembered that candidate, and that person got the job. Today, this is a leader in the organization. So sometimes you become more memorable if you can spin the table. So just keep these things in mind. Think about what you're going to ask. That person asked their question earlier on in their interview. And then they had a couple of good questions they asked at the end of the interview as well. So be mindful of what you will ask the interviewer.